Welcome to Latino Marin. I'm Vida Flores, your host. Today we have a special guest, candidate for Superior Court Judge, Michael Coffino. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Vida. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy that you took the time to come and speak to Latino Marin. Talk to us about the different divisions of the Superior Court.
Well, in Marin, the court system is actually part of a larger California-wide court system. And so it's actually the Superior Court of the state of California, and it just happens to be in and for the county of Marin. And what that means is that every county in California has a particular branch of the California Superior Court. And some counties have more judges, some counties have fewer judges. Marin has 12 sitting judges. I previously worked in Lake County, where it's a much smaller population, and there were only 4 judges, or sometimes 5 judges in that county. And the way it's organized here, as everywhere, is that there's a division of labor among the judges between the civil, who deal with disputes between individuals or businesses, and the criminal division. And those judges handle criminal cases where the state of California is accusing somebody of a crime. And then, within the civil division, there are other subdivisions. There's family law. There's a probate court. There's even a traffic court here in Marin. So it's basically 6 judges who are assigned in the criminal part, and then 6 judges in the roughly defined civil side.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about your educational background. Where did you go to school?
Well, I grew up in Mill Valley, so I went to high school here at Tamalpais High School. And following high school, I went on to college at the University of Oregon. And while I was in high school, I was very interested in sports. And I was on the track team, and I actually became an All-American in the discus, which is why I went to the University of Oregon, because I really wanted to be on the track team there. And in college, I majored in philosophy. And I graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Oregon. And then I went on to the University of Wisconsin. And at the University of Wisconsin, which is in Madison, Wisconsin, I got my law degree, but I was also interested in continuing to study philosophy. And so I also received a master's degree in philosophy there. While I was in law school, I participated in the Law Review, which is a student publication that actually goes nationwide to other law schools, in which scholars write about topics in law, and the students get a chance to edit and select the pieces for publication. And I also wrote an article that was published in the Law Review. When I finished my graduate studies, I decided to come back to California, and rather than take a plane or drive, I decided to travel by bicycle. And this is actually, I think, part of my education, because it put me in close contact with all kinds of different people and environments across the country. And it was a really inspiring journey, and that's how I came ultimately back to California.
Have you lived your entire adult life here in Marin County?
No, I was actually born in New York City. My whole family is from New York, actually. My mom and dad grew up in New York. My grandparents, of course, were from New York. My dad's mother immigrated from Poland in the 1920s, and his father came from Greece. And so I was born in New York. We moved to California when I was pretty young, probably in 1973 or so, and we settled in Mill Valley. I grew up there. My aunt and uncle had a bakery that they ran for 22 years in Mill Valley, and it was a wonderful place to hang out. I also worked there from time to time, usually in the summers as a dishwasher, delivery driver, and had other kinds of jobs, working construction and roofing and that sort of thing. And right before high school, we actually moved to France for 2 years, and I had the chance to go to urban public schools in big European cities and have contact with a real mix of different kinds of people, North Africans, French from all over. And the schools there run from, I think it's 4th grade right up through high school. So although I was in the 7th and 8th grades during those years, the schoolyard was comprised of kids of all different ages and cultures, and it was a really wonderful experience. And in, let's see, I think it was 1982, we moved back to the States, and that's when I started high school at Tam High.
Thank you. The Latino community is all about family and extended family, so that gives us an idea about your longevity and your family experience, so I really appreciate that. Can you give me a little information about your relevant work history?
Sure. So I've been a lawyer for 20 years now, and I started out my career working in civil litigation in different law firms in San Francisco and in Oakland, and I worked for 5 years in civil law. Some of the cases I worked on at that time involved disputes between businesses, small business owners, large companies, copyright disputes. There was a trademark infringement case that we worked on. And in 2001, I decided to start in a criminal position, and that was when I went to Lake County, which I mentioned before, and that's where my first experience practicing criminal law happened. But one of the things that I did while I was a civil lawyer that kind of gave me an interest in helping individuals with their legal problems was I took a pro bono case, meaning a case where I was offering my services without charge, to a Chilean man from Santiago, Chile, who was facing political persecution in his home country. And I represented him in an attempt to get him asylum status in the United States because he was afraid to return to his country to face persecution there. And over a long process of assembling records and evidence, we were successful in front of the federal official who reviewed his asylum claim, and I was able to get him status in this country, which was a very satisfying result for me to be able to help him that way.
Mm-hmm. What professional organizations do you belong to?
Well, I'm a member of the State Bar of California, but also of New York and Wisconsin. So that means that if I wanted to, I could practice law in either of those states as well. And locally, I'm a member of professional lawyer organizations like the Marin County Bar Association, the statewide California Public Defender Association, and then certain environmental groups because I have a strong interest in the outdoors and nature conservation. So I'm a member of the Sierra Club, the Marin County Bicycle Coalition, the Point Reyes National Seashore Association, and let's see, what else? Other type of organizations, some of them are slipping my mind right now.
Mm-hmm. Have you done any work with boards and commissions or volunteer work in the community?
Yeah, I worked as a instructor at Alliant International University in San Francisco, and I taught a law class there to some graduate students in psychology. And I had a chance to try to introduce them to some of the concepts that are important in law and society, and that was a really interesting experience. I brought in some guest speakers who practice in the field of law and police officers and psychologists, so yeah.
If you're elected judge, how will you serve the Latino community?
Well, Vito, in my current job as a deputy public defender for the county of Marin, where I've worked there for 13 years, a lot of my clients are Spanish-speaking clients who live here in Marin and are part of the Latino community. So I talked about that asylum case that I handled on behalf of that gentleman. That was an example of trying to help somebody who not only has legal problems, but has problems with where they're going to live and how they're going to continue their life in the United States. And in particular, in the Latino community here, we have immigration consequences very frequently for people who come through the court system and are charged with a crime. So one of the ways that I try to serve my Latino clients is by really paying careful attention to what the immigration consequences may be of their criminal cases. And interestingly, the California legislature passed a statute this year that requires both defense attorneys and prosecutors' offices to take account of the often very severe consequences in immigration court of people who are charged with crimes, and basically instructed prosecutors' offices to take that into consideration when resolving cases. And it's an extraordinary statute. If you look at it, it calls attention to the fact that if somebody is deported from the United States to their home country, they first go into a detention center where they do not have the right to counsel. It points out as well that 50,000 parents of children were deported within the last 2 years. So a criminal case is one thing, but often for folks from Central America and from South America, the more serious consequence is what's going to happen to them if they're deported or if they lose their status as a result of suffering a criminal conviction. One of the interesting cases that I've had in my career, because I've done criminal defense law for a total of 15 years, is I had a client who was from Guatemala, from a small village in the highlands, and he was an indigenous person, did not speak Spanish. In fact, he was from such a remote area that it was almost impossible to find somebody who could communicate with him. And I had to go to UC Berkeley and find somebody who had done her anthropological fieldwork in his area. And I hired her to come and communicate with him and make a report to the court about his background and his situation. So, you know, I do enjoy getting to know my clients beyond the simple legal problems that immediately present themselves in a courtroom, and try to get to know their families. And often, you know, I'm going to their homes to try to find witnesses and talk to them. So those are just some examples of how I've tried to serve the Latino community.
And what makes you the best candidate for the position?
Well, Vita, one of the major issues in this election has to do with the fact that the judges in our county here in Marin are made up entirely of people who have never worked in a public defender office. And the Bay Area has 9 counties. Every one of those counties, except Marin, has on its bench a judge who previously worked in a public defender office. And there's a reason for that, which is that people recognize that it's important to have judges that come from varied criminal law backgrounds. And it enhances the judiciary, it enhances the bench and the court system that prevails or presides in a certain county, to have judges both who were prosecutors, yes, but also judges who worked as public defenders. And in fact, in Marin, it's been that way for decades, that we have not had somebody on the bench who had experience representing poor people, people that didn't have money, who were charged with crimes. In fact, 1977, I believe, was the last time somebody was elevated to the bench in Marin who had previously worked as a public defender. And so I hope to bring to the bench a perspective that enhances and adds something to the point of view of the judges who are sitting here. And I think that's especially important because the majority of the cases that are heard in our court system are criminal cases. And of those cases, most of them are represented by the public defender's office. So it's important to have judges that have varied backgrounds and who have experience on both sides.
You mentioned that Marin County has 4 different divisions in the Superior Court. Do you think it's important to have experience in all of those divisions before becoming a judge?
I think it is important. You want to give the judges who are sitting in Marin the option of placing a particular person in a department where they have some familiarity with the legal issues. As I've said, I worked in civil law for 5 years, and I've spent 15 years working in criminal law. Now, typically, the judges who are assigned in the criminal department have more experience in criminal law, and the judges in the civil and family law divisions have experience in those areas. But it is important, and to be adaptable to sitting in different kinds of courtrooms, I think, is an important asset that I bring to this race.
We're early in the candidacy, we're early in the cycle. Do you have any endorsements that you'd like to share with the viewers?
Sure. It is early, and we're still working on our endorsements, but I'm happy to say that I have endorsements from different areas of society. The former San Quentin warden is endorsing my candidacy. He was the warden at San Quentin for 10 years. I have endorsements from both criminal lawyers in the county and civil lawyers. I have endorsements as well from the mayor of San Anselmo, and from one of the endorsements that I'm most proud of is that two of the Spanish-speaking court interpreters who work on the court floor in Marin are endorsing me, as well as one retired interpreter. And I think that's significant because, first of all, they've known me for my career, and they have a chance, interestingly enough, to participate by translating in attorney-client conversations. And they really are, in a situation to assess a person and their skill as a lawyer, their ability to communicate with their client in a unique position that way. So happy to say that they've endorsed me as well. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the categories. Oh yeah, a probation officer who's a 28-year veteran of the Marin County Probation Department.
This is a difficult election for many of the voters. What are two key things that voters should look at when they are voting for a Superior Court judge?
Well, I think you want a judge who has broad experience in the law, which I have, having worked both in civil and in criminal. You want a judge as well who, in his career as a lawyer, has spent a lot of time in the courtroom, which I have. And you want somebody who is familiar with courtroom practices and procedures, who is good at critical thinking, who can listen to arguments with an open mind and respectfully and carefully, absorbing information from all relevant sources, and then being decisive in making a decision based on that information. And I think also that one of the things that I've admired in the judges that I've practiced in front of is a quality of patience and of not letting your personal ego get in the way of your job as a judge, but letting the action play out among the lawyers and not interposing yourself over much in the proceedings, but being more of a neutral arbiter. And I see that as maybe a model for how I would be a judge. Another thing that I really appreciate among the judges that I've worked for, we have wonderful judges here in Marin, is what you might call a discourse model of adjudication, where there's conversation between the judge and the lawyers about the legal issues with a view toward coming to a conclusion that's a correct conclusion based on the facts and based on the law and the authorities that really dictate the outcome of a case in most instances.
Why should the voters take the time to research and vote in this election?
I think obviously choosing a judge is a very important decision. So I think that voters need to pay close attention to who the candidates are and their backgrounds. And I am the one candidate among all of the people running who has devoted his career to protecting and safeguarding the constitutional rights of individuals. Those rights are really at the center of what makes our legal system great and what makes this country great. And as a judge, I would seek as well, like all judges should, to make sure that the constitutional rights of criminal defendants are respected and honored, just as the right of the prosecution to bring their case is honored. And frankly, justice only happens in this country when you have prosecutors. You've got to have prosecutors driving hard to try to prove their case, and when you have criminal defense lawyers doing the same on behalf of their clients. And if one side of that equation or the other fails somehow, then justice is not done. Judges, I believe, likewise, ought to be drawn from both groups. Now, that's not to say that I would have a lenient attitude toward crime at all. But as a public defender, you really are in a position to do a couple of the things that judges are expected to do. One of them is to withhold judgment and try to avoid bias when it comes to a person who's in front of the court. And I'm in the habit of doing that with my clients because they're accused of serious crimes. I can't afford to be judgmental toward them. And secondly, the independence that a judge is expected to have is another thing that I think public defenders practice all the time, in that they have to apply the law, regardless of negative public opinion against them or their clients, and just do their jobs.
Mm-hmm. What additional information should viewers know about you and your candidacy?
Well, I feel that my background is important, and it informs everything about me and everything that I've done. And who I am is a product of the hard work that I've done, whether it's in sports or in school or in law, and the fact that I cared about doing a good job. Because whatever accomplishments you may have, they're only meaningful in the sense that they demonstrate some quality about you. And in my case, I've always worked hard and I've cared about doing a good job, and I'm very conscientious. I hold myself to high standards. Those are the values that I would bring to the bench as a judge.
And is that why voters should vote for you?
That is certainly one of the reasons, yeah.
Are there any other reasons why voters should vote for you?
Well, as I was discussing a little bit before, the protection of individual constitutional rights is a very important feature of our legal system. And I believe that I'm the only candidate who has really made that the focus of his career. The way that our country was set up is interesting that way because the Constitution first established the structure of government. There would be 3 branches and they would function this, that, and the other way, basically giving a lot of power to the federal government. And many countries have strong central governments. What makes the United States unique is that the founders then went on to establish a set of personal rights in the individual that limited government power, and that includes the right to free speech, for example. The government can't restrict your free speech, except in certain circumstances. The right to be free from government searches and seizures, the right to the assistance of counsel at trial, and other rights. And these are really what set our system apart and what caused people to regard the United States as a civilized nation and a nation of freedom and democracy. And so, my work as a criminal defense lawyer really gives life to those abstract rights in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and makes them relevant to a guy walking down the street in San Rafael or living in his home in Marin. And so I think that's an important consideration for the voters.
And how can the voters get in touch with you? Do you have a website?
Yes, Vita, I do. www.coffinoforjudge.com.
And a Twitter, Facebook?
We are on Facebook as well. You can look us up. I think it's Mike Coffino for Judge. We do have a Twitter account, and if you go to either of those places, you'll find contact information, email, and telephone numbers.
Oh, fantastic. You'll have to make sure and like our Facebook page as well. And we can be found at Twitter, Latino Marin 360.
Great. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's important that you took the time to speak to Latino viewers as well as the Marin County voters in general.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And I'll say good night from Latino Marin. Latino Marin weaves the Latino experience into the fabric of Marin County. We are advocating and educating our Latino community. We're also donating laptops to students. Our goal for next year is to donate 500 computers. If you have a gently used laptop with a newer operating system, please contact Latino Marin at latinomarin360@gmail.com. We also have a sister website called Voto Marin. You'll find PowerPoint presentations, what's on your ballot, dedicated information about Latinos voting in the United States, California, and Marin County. Thank you very much for joining us, and please visit our website, latinomarin.org, votomarin.org. Follow our Twitter feed at Latino Marin 360.